Here is a word on Global Perspective, which is on voluntary relinquishment of U.S. citizenship. This professional advice will be displayed on our screen by attorney Ramesh Khurana, who is the chief attorney and counselor at immigration law at the Khurana Law Firm in Gaithersburg, Maryland. The moderator here with him today is attorney Kenneth Haber from Boyd's, Maryland. Let's catch these two attorneys in discussion.
Hello, my name's Kenneth Haber. I'm a former assistant United States attorney, and I'm also a former senior attorney of the Office of Investigation of the United States Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General. And with me today in the studio is Ramesh Khurana. Mr. Khurana is one of the foremost experts in immigration law, and he's here to answer some of our questions concerning immigration law. And this is the Capital Forum. Welcome, Ramesh.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate your generous introduction, though I'm not an expert on immigration law, but I will definitely try to do justice to your questions.
Very good, very good. Well, you're an authority on it, I would say, at least.
This is my focus area of practice.
Absolutely, absolutely.
No, I appreciate that.
Can we talk a little bit about U.S. citizenship? You know, we take it for granted so often, and yet people can relinquish it, apparently. And I'd like to find out a little about some of the issues involved in that. Can we talk about that today?
Oh, sure. You know, Ken, you know that people go through so much hardship and make arduous efforts to get naturalized and obtain the U.S. citizenship.
Yes.
But now there is a small but growing trend of people, of U.S. citizens, who are deciding to relinquish U.S. citizenship. And these concerns may range from the tax issues to family unity, which are understandable. But now number has really increased, I would say, more than threefolds recently. You know, economies in the world, they are growing so much, and different countries have so much to offer to the U.S. citizens, especially who have dual citizenships, because they can afford to go back, or at some point, because of the concerns for the U.S. taxation issues, they decide to relinquish it. It's happening.
I'm sure it is, but it's most unfortunate, you know, because at least from my perspective, I think that this is the greatest country in the world. I really mean that. You know, I was raised and bred here, of course, and this is what I'm used to, but you know, others can have their own perspective on it, I'm sure. Can you explain what is the voluntary relinquishment of U.S. citizenship? What are its implications, and for the individual who is to be a former U.S. citizen?
Sure. You know, the main thing is the buzzwords are, if a U.S. citizen wants to relinquish the U.S. citizenship, it has to be voluntary and intentional. So these are the buzzwords. Now, if it is not a voluntary decision and it's not an intentional decision, this kind of request is not accepted. And when we are talking about the voluntary relinquishment, and usually relinquishment is accomplished only at the diplomatic or U.S. consulates or embassies abroad. And people are required to make appointments, and they have to appear before the consular officer at the consulates, and it's a two-step process. The first is the kind of information gathering or information sharing stage. Consular officer is going to explain to the person who has decided to relinquish U.S. citizenship, like what are the consequences of his relinquishment. And moreover, the officer has to make a determination whether this is a voluntary and intentional decision, or it is clouded with some other considerations. So that is step one. And I tell you something very interesting. Sometimes it is taking about a year even to make this appointment at the U.S. consulate. It's not like you are applying for a visa and appointment usually is available within 1 week or 2 weeks. Now
well, they
here,
want to make sure that a person really knows their mind.
exactly, people have to really wait long, and then the second interview basically again is conducted by the consular officer, and during this interview process again the officer wants to make sure that the gravity of the situation is very well realized by the person who is going to relinquish the U.S. citizenship, and he understands the consequences as well, because there are some immigration consequences as well. A person who is a U.S. citizen, and if he is holding just one citizenship, he is not having a dual citizenship, and if he relinquishes U.S. citizenship, he may be left stateless.
What are the consequences of being stateless? I can only imagine they're very dire.
Yeah, if a person is left stateless, so he may not be having protection of any country in the world. Like if a person is a U.S. citizen at this point of time and he doesn't have the citizenship of any other country, now once he decides to do it and it is accepted, then basically he is stateless and he cannot go anywhere. Where to go? So that's the major issue. So he is to think about it. So that's the duty of the embassy consulate officer, to just caution him. Look, what kind of decision you are making? Are you sure you understand the consequences of this decision or not?
What steps do they take to ensure that the person who's coming forward is actually the person who is a citizen and not just some sort of phony using some sort of faked documentation and faked passport? What do they do?
All citizens, they have their U.S. Government's issued passports, and these can be verified. There is a scanning process, and people who obtain U.S. citizenship through naturalization, they have the naturalization certificate, and there is other number which is called the A number. So based on the A number, there is an alien file for every person who graduated from, let us say, H-1B to green card and then to U.S. citizenship. So you can always verify their records that he is the real person. Then of course he is to show his state issued ID as well.
And certainly the person who came through the process of gaining the citizenship would have been fingerprinted when he got his citizenship, which of course Americans are not normally fingerprinted.
That's right. Yeah, you are right. Yeah.
So if it's an American, he might not have had his fingerprints put into the files to begin with.
But U.S. consulate or embassies, they have access to databases. So I don't think that's very hard to verify whether he's really a U.S. citizen or not.
Or the U.S. citizen.
Yeah, the U.S. citizen.
Yes. Because I can see somebody wanting to be very negative to somebody, treat them in a very bad fashion, go and claim to be so-and-so, and sometimes the documentation can really, the false documentation can really look legitimate.
Yeah, but you are raising a very interesting question, Ken, but candidly speaking, I never come across a situation or a case where a phony person appeared to relinquish U.S. citizenship. I mean, no person can dare to go to that extent, appearing before the officer twice, and then he is staying in that particular country to wait for the appointment and making another appointment. And as you rightly said, now fingerprints. So you can really identify the person through the fingerprints.
Right.
Yeah.
Can a parent relinquish the citizenship of a child, or does that child have to become an adult before citizenship can be relinquished?
Ken, as I said at the very outset, the buzzwords are the relinquishment has to be intentional and voluntarily. Now, a child is not basically presumed to have maturity and sense of discretion to decide whether his decision is correct or not. And in fact, these are provided in the foreign manual, that a child who is under 16 is presumed not to have the discretionary thinking.
And the
So he
parent
doesn't
can't do
doesn't have the maturity. So a parent cannot relinquish U.S. citizenship on behalf of the child. Yes,
Very
cannot.
good. That's good.
Yeah.
I can see some parents who are really strange in the mind doing some strange things for their children that their children would otherwise regret.
Well, it happens. You know, other day I received a call from a father. He said, you know, he's a green card holder and his two children are also green card holders. And he was asking me a question where he would like to surrender his green card and whether he could surrender green cards on behalf of his children as well. You know? So basically, again, it becomes a question of whether this will be a known and intentional decision by the child. Answer is no. A father cannot make a decision on behalf of the children. And especially when the child under 16 is presumed not to have the knowing and intentional decision making power.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, like children.
So
need to be protected.
safeguards are there.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. What about the reversibility of a relinquishment of citizenship? Is there any such thing as reversing it?
I would say the decision is irreversible. You know, once the decision has been made, you know, the way this process works is, first of all, the consular officer, after he is satisfied that this is an intentional and knowing decision by the person, now he prepares basically the cancellation certificate, and that certificate is sent to the State Department here in Washington DC, and once it is approved by the State Department, one set of cancellation certificate will go to the person who is now former or ex U.S. citizen, and the other set would go to the USCIS, where the A file of the person is maintained. And moreover, you know, USCIS keeps a track of all U.S. citizenship certificates. So once the certificate is issued, so it becomes irreversible. Now, if you want to acquire citizenship again, you have to again start from the scratch. So first of all, you have to apply for the green card, and once on green card, then you have to wait for the statutory period of 3 years or 5 years, depending upon different situations. Only then you can file your citizenship application. It's an irreversible decision. So people have to really think twice when they decide to relinquish U.S. citizenship. And there are immigration consequences.
What are some of the consequences of statelessness? I mean, like, I would imagine that's beyond the immigration consequences even.
You know, main thing, as I said, if a person becomes stateless, now he doesn't receive the protection from any other country. Like, you know, if U.S. citizen is traveling India and that traveler has some difficulties or, you know, other situations where his life is in danger, he is to just get in touch with the U.S. embassy or consulate, and consulate will definitely come to the rescue of that person, because this is the responsibility of the U.S. government to protect its nationals anywhere in the world when they are in need of help. But if a person is stateless, he doesn't belong to any country, no country is going to own him and come to the protection of that person.
I don't think a lot of people really understand how much of a jungle it is out there, and
That's
without
true.
without a strong country backing you up, how much you are at the mercy of other powers and people.
Yeah, and other consequence would be, once a person is stateless, he doesn't hold the passport of any country, then if that person wants to undertake some international travel, he needs a passport. So the question is, which country's passport he is going to have?
What happens to him when he's in a country? I imagine it depends on the country that he's in, whether they immediately take steps to deport him, and then the question becomes, who will take him?
Right, exactly. If a person is stateless, there is no taker.
Ends up a refugee, but no place to be, even a refugee.
Right. So that's why it is a very tough decision which a person is making, and that's the reason there are two interviews by the consulate officer to make sure this person is making a voluntary decision and intentional decision, and he understands the consequences.
What are some of the tax consequences, quickly to wrap things up, of going stateless? Because that apparently is the incentive.
Right. Again, this topic is reserved for CPAs to talk, and my advice to the audience would be always talk to your experienced CPA in regard to the tax consequences. But I can simply say that if you are relinquishing your U.S. citizenship, there is an exit tax which you are responsible to pay. That this is what I would say. Yeah.
Last crowning touch.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to thank you very much for coming on in and elucidating on this topic.
Thank you so much. It was really an interesting topic.